This is NewsDesk. I'm your host, Jason Miller, here today with Dr. David Summers, director of the Summers Institute of Foreign Affairs. Thanks for being here today, David. Well, let's get started. The waiting is over. Thursday's Supreme Court ruling upheld the 2010 health care law, which means ongoing trends will continue, and those who waited on the sidelines for the court will now have to implement their parts of the law. I'll just run through a few of these. The consumers, for them, they have to buy their own insurance or pay a penalty for skipping it. Employers will now have to come to grips with it and minimize the parts they don't like, whatever that would be. Hospitals have moved forward already with electronic records, but not necessarily with the healthcare teams needed to prevent mistakes that can lead to penalties for care that falls below quality standards. There's a few more, too. I didn't know some of these things.
Right. Well, it's a huge bill with a few thousand pages, which will, of course, demand much more, how should I say, much expanded government in terms of its personnel to deal with it. Never mind the great deal of money that has to also be expended, right? So it leaves great fodder for the Republicans. Governor Romney has, of course, promised to repeal it the first day he's in office, or something to that effect. Everybody is declaring victory. Minority Leader Pelosi declared victory. Mr. Obama declared victory. And on all sides, I think they are preparing to go and do battle for this.
You know what, though, David? I think a lot of people, they really don't know the details. And I think what they find out, when they find out, I think a lot more of the population is going to be pleased with this.
The problem is, I don't think anybody, or almost nobody, has read the entire law. And in fact, as was pointed out, very few members of Congress read the law when they voted for it.
Right, but let's look at some more of these.
Very complicated.
Let's look at some more of these. You know, some of these make really good sense. And look at this. It says insurers need to dig deep to pay rebates to consumers for premium money not spent on health care. They have to spend a certain amount on health care, and otherwise they have to return the money, unlike now. States that they can't take too high a percentage for their own overhead or own salaries for the insurance companies. The states that balked at creating healthcare exchanges from which the residents can compare and buy health insurance must create them. The way it is now is I think there's only certain insurance companies only do certain areas, so you don't have that much choice. It's not that much competition.
Right, competition is very important.
Well, sure. Let's see, it says here, because many of the law's provisions kick in 2013 to 14, that leaves precious few months to get to work. Insurers will no longer be allowed to turn down anyone because of pre-existing medical condition. That seems to be
popular, very popular.
Mm-hmm. More patients will be eligible for Medicaid. It says
the Medicaid rolls, however, will be greatly expanded.
Right. It says even single men will be able to qualify. Is anybody whose income is below 130% of the poverty level will qualify. Also, by 2014, the working poor will be eligible for subsidies to help them pay their own health insurance. People that have jobs but just aren't earning enough. Then it says federal standards for health insurance plans will eliminate junk plans, in quotes. These are the ones with huge deductibles that provide little or no real benefits. That's the insurance I have, by the way. $10,000 deductible.
Yes.
So, you know, a lot of this seems really good news.
It is. There are many popular elements to it. The question then is, does the country retain all of it, or do we just get rid of that and incorporate those elements that you mentioned that made sense and get rid of much of the rest of it? That's what the battle, I think, is going to be.
Well, like we talked about before the show, you know, even if Republicans sweep everything, unless they get at least 60 senators, the Democrats would be able to filibuster
Will filibuster to death.
and will not be able to change the law as it is.
You know, that's a very good point that very few people have brought to light, I think.
Right, it's because of a Senate rule that they have. Let's talk about now. Now, this wasn't the only ruling by the Supreme Court this past week. There was the Arizona ruling, and there were several other more minor ones.
Yes.
So let's talk about the winners and the losers of the week. So first we have President Obama. So obviously he did well. This from San Francisco Chronicle, actually. It says, the president convinced Chief Justice John Roberts to side with him on the health care and the Arizona immigration enforcement. And that was the swing vote on both of those, I believe.
Well, but one wonders, is this a short-term win for the president or a long-term loss? That is to say, it certainly has energized large numbers of people who are against this whole health care plan, and the majority of Americans are against it. Every single poll shows that. The majority of this country is against that plan. So it may be a short-term win for the president because this is his major piece of legislation, his only major piece of legislation. But long-term, it may redound to his defeat.
Well, who knows? It could be by November, as more and more details of this health care bill get out, more people favor it. It may be a wash for him.
Perhaps.
Let's see, Nancy Pelosi, it was a winning week for her. John Roberts, a winning week for him.
I suppose, although
he's the darling
been vilified by many as a traitor.
Well, still, it's according to this article, the left and the right are both pleased with him. It's for different reasons. Says he received kudos from most nonpartisan legal scholars also. Corporate America.
A traitor to conservative causes, I mean to say, of course.
Right. Corporate America is also considered a winner because there was another ruling which dealt with unlimited contributions, not to federal, because that's already been
decided.
Decided, thanks. But this dealt with states. It was a whole separate issue. Would corporations be able to donate unlimited amounts for state elections and issues? So the losers.
Governor Walker is pleased with that.
I suppose so. Now,
sure.
The losers, they list here the 10th Amendment conservatives. That deals with state rights. Tea Party conservatives are unhappy. House Republicans. Honest veterans. There was another ruling.
Honest veterans?
Yeah.
Oh.
The ruling was free speech protections. Well, the court ruled that because of free speech protections, con men are allowed to claim that they won military medals that they never earned.
Yes, well, that's free speech. Yes, that's right.
Exactly.
Free speech.
And the other losers were CNN and Fox because they both declared early that the health care bill was going to be shot down, but they were wrong. Once they read through it, they saw that they were wrong. All right, next. This from Reuters. Republican-led U.S. House of Representatives plans to file a civil suit in federal court next several weeks over Obama administration refusal to give Congress documents about a failed gun-running probe. That's the Fast and Furious. Well, why don't you explain what this is? I haven't followed this carefully.
Well, it's that the Department of Justice and the ATF had a cockamamie plan, really, to sell large numbers of guns to the cartels and therefore trace where the guns went and therefore somehow bring to justice those who were using these weapons. The problem is that the weapons got into the wrong hands, if there were any right hands, and they couldn't really find all those weapons, thousands of them, and some of the weapons were used for the murder of ATF agents. And then when Congress asked for the details of all this, the Justice Department basically stonewalled. Now, and the Attorney General himself said at one time that he knew nothing about it, but further evidence came out that indeed he did know about it, and indeed, to a large extent, gave his imprimatur to it. That's a real problem. He's basically accused of contempt of Congress, really lying to Congress. That's not a small thing. It's not a small thing. It is true that he is the only, as far as I know, the only cabinet officer ever, sitting cabinet officer to have been held in contempt by Congress.
Well, I got to tell you, like I say, I don't know that much about this, but just on the surface, it sounds like a big to-do about nothing.
Lying to Congress?
Well, I mean, the whole thing, you know, so it was a law enforcement action, undercover action that just didn't work. I'm sure there's quite a few of them in local police departments or the FBI that just didn't work out.
Who was held accountable? Who was fired by this? Did the White House know? Did the president know? The president claims executive privilege.
Well,
which means say maybe he knew. Really?
Well, aside from that, I also understand that this was started under Bush.
It was started and ended under Bush. It was started, the same similar plan, and ended. It was resuscitated. It was revivified by the present administration. Anyway, that's where it stands.
Well, the other thing is...
They refused to do anything about it, by the way. The Justice Department said that it will refuse to do anything.
Well, all right, but it also looks like it maybe is just, you know, something to bring up to muddy the waters before the election.
Some people say that's true.
So, you know, I don't know, but all right. We'll move on to bigger, more important issues. All right, Iraq. We were there for quite a few years and spent about $1 trillion. So this from Huffington Post. Half a year after the U.S. military left Iraq, dire predictions seem to be coming true. The country is mired in violence and the government is on the verge of collapsing. With no relief in sight, there's growing talk of Iraq as a failed state. What do you think of that?
Oh, I think that's overblown. Iraq is now emerging as the third largest oil exporter in the whole world. Not bad, which is going to bring them a great deal of money. That's not a small thing. Yes, there are many bombings and attacks by the Al-Qaeda folks and the rest to see if they can destabilize this government. I don't think they're going to be very successful in doing that. It's a very difficult government where you have disparate peoples living together with not a great deal in common. Kurds, and Shiites, and Sunnis, and all. I think they'll get through it, and America's giving them help in doing that. We still have some forces in the country that will be helping the Iraqis.
Special forces, small groups.
Yes.
All right. All right, and that brings us to this from CNN. There is no guarantee that a sweeping new international agreement on Syria will succeed in ending the conflict there, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has conceded. She expressed optimism that a new agreement hammered out this past Saturday would help ease President Bashar al-Assad out of power. This is the first plan backed by Russia, China, and the West. It calls for a transitional government as a step towards ending the 16-month uprising.
She just declared, I think for the first time, Assad must go.
Well, she's been saying that, but Russia and China haven't been, but they're on board now.
Well, but how are they going to do that? Oh, Assad must go. That's very nice.
Well, he has to agree also.
Well, yes, that is, by the way, the little sticking point.
Yeah, they don't mention whether he's agreed.
No, mention that he's agreed to go.
Well,
not at all. He must go. Good. What are you going to do about it? Well, that's a whole other matter.
All right, we'll see. Now, you know, for quite a while now, Russia's thought about Syria differently than we have. You know, and we don't get much coverage about this. You know, we just don't hear all of the sides of many of these issues.
True.
So this is an interesting article. This is from the Christian Science Monitor. What is Russia thinking on Syria? Now, it says here, in Russia's view, each state, each country's control over its own affairs is the only thing that stands in the way of domination by strong states over the weaker ones.
Yeah, well, they're afraid that somehow Western countries will, perhaps at one time, interfere in their own affairs militarily. The Chinese have the same attitude.
Right. So it says, in Syria, they argue, Western nations are pursuing their own geopolitical interests under the guise of a humanitarian right to protect, which supposedly trumps the country's sovereignty. Some experts say the Kremlin's basic fear is that any precedent that licenses outside forces to change a regime in a strife-ridden country like Syria might one day be used as an argument in favor of the same thing on some other country, including Russia.
Well, we did it in Russia before. We've done it in China before. We interfered militarily in both of those countries historically.
We just decide where we're going in.
Yeah.
So you can see where they have a valid point here. Now, also Syria has been a very steady and actually now the sole client state amid the shifting alliances in the Middle East. So that's another reason why Russia's loyal.
Good customer for weaponry.
It says here that also Russia is Syria's principal arms supplier with an estimated $5 billion in weapons contracts.
Naval base.
A naval base at the port of Tartus, which is Russia's only military base outside the former Soviet Union. There's also about $15 billion in traditional economic contracts, construction, energy projects, and the like. And something I had no idea about, but there's 100,000 Russians living in Syria, which will create a problem if they have to evacuate all those people at one time.
Yes, well.
So you can see.
We did it in Iran.
Right.
It wasn't easy.
There is another side to this.
Sure there is. And furthermore, as Putin said in his visit to Israel and other places, does the United States really want to back Muslim Brotherhood takeovers of all these countries? Is this in the interest of the United States? It seems not, right? The first thing that the president of Egypt called for, can you imagine, was the release of the so-called blind sheikh. This blind sheikh was responsible for the first attack on the Twin Towers. The idea that we're going to release that terrorist mastermind is ludicrous. Anyway, that is something that Putin stressed. And he's got a lot of Muslims on his doorstep.
All right. Now, Putin, he was busy this past week. Now, he was in Israel. Let's talk about that. This is from Breitbart. Israel rolled out the red carpet for Putin and a host of Russian dignitaries this week, showing a desire by both parties to repair strained ties between the two countries, that's Israel and Russia. They both share struggles with fanatical Islam that give them a strong mutual point of sympathy. Obama's confused policies regarding the Arab Spring and his cool attitude towards Israel have left a vacuum of influence in the Middle East that Putin is only too eager to fill. It goes on here, this is from Depka. The Russian president spent a day and a half in Israel before moving on to a visit to the Palestinian Authority and Jordan. His initiative caused wide puzzlement. What brought him to the region so soon after assuming the presidency? That was a puzzle.
And 4 plane loads of guys.
Oh, that many?
4 big airplanes, chock full of all the top folks.
Okay. The emperor would not be at all surprised by a U.S.-European Arab offensive against Syria or a U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran. He thinks it's coming, one of those two or both. Putin said, "We know better than the Americans what's going on in Iran and with Iran's nuclear program." He not only offered Israel a back channel to Tehran, but also touted his services as a broker more effective than Washington. He claimed for restoring the old close relationship between Israel and Turkey. So he's saying that he would be able to broker better relations with Israel and Turkey. They were once allies and they're not now. And I don't know, I guess something with Iran and Israel. to be able to help there.
If he's able to do that, all the better. It's, as you say, the Russian point of view is not well known in this country. And more and more, as the Muslim Brotherhood takes over, and as they will almost definitely take over if Assad goes in Syria, his comments tend to be taken more seriously.
Well, here's what he says about that. He says that the Syrian president is obviously headed for a fall. That's a quote. It will bring al-Qaeda to Damascus, and that is why Russia is working hard in hand with Turkey for the sake of an orderly transition of power. So Assad can go, but as long as it's someone in the Assad government that takes over, that continues, so that would keep
the
al-Qaeda
way they
out.
did it in Yemen.
Yeah, exactly.
The way they did it in Yemen. But we passed that, I think. The animosities are so great. The killings have been so massive.
Well,
numbers.
Well, aside from that, the puzzle is why the U.S. is supporting the Muslim Brotherhood's takeover of so many of these countries.
Democracy, you see, we are committed to what passes for a democratic will of the people takeover of governments. The Arab Spring, you see.
All right. Well, let me just read some more here. Putin referred to the Muslim Brotherhood's rise to power in Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt, and its substantial role in the Syrian uprising as an Islamic flood threatening us all. It's not just Israel, but Russia is on the border with quite a few Islamic countries, and they're a little worried about their own situation there. Interesting. He says that Iran's perception of the Arab revolt, Putin said that by supporting it, Tehran was simply paying lip service to disguise the fact that it feels threatened also.
Perhaps.
By the Brotherhood.
You have to remember that he crushed the Muslim uprising in the Chechen uprising, crushed it with tremendous force.
I didn't know that. That was a Muslim uprising? Or was that just Chechen nationalism?
Well, a good deal of both, but they had a lot of al-Qaeda also there, right? As an Islamic rebellion, and that was put down with tremendous force.
All right, now the biggest reason why Putin went to Israel, besides all this, was a business deal.
Business.
Somehow Israel got really fortunate, and a couple of years ago they discovered vast amounts of natural gas and oil off its coast in the Mediterranean. And Russia wants to form a partnership with Turkey, Greece, and Israel to help develop that area.
I think that's marvelous. The Turks have threatened to send in warships to disrupt this, right? Because this is between Israel and Cyprus, and they, that is the Turks, control northern Cyprus. And they have threatened to disrupt all of this. Now, if Russia can come in, bring the Turks in, that's great for everybody.
Well, there's one more party, the Lebanon. The Hezbollah is also threatened to fire missiles at the oil platforms and the ships.
With the Russians, if they do, it's really nice that the Russians have a major part in this exploration.
Well, of course.
Because if they fire at the Russians, no monkey business. The Russians know how to respond when their few of their guys were taken hostage and killed later in Lebanon. They responded with tremendous force.
And it hasn't happened again.
And
well,
it hasn't happened again.
You know what? It probably wouldn't reach that point because Russia has vast influence in Syria, and Syria has vast influence in Lebanon.
That's right.
So
good.
It really sounds like I would be shocked if those countries don't come together to work together on this deal.
Sounds perfect.
It does for all of them.
Serendipitous.
All right, next we've got about 5 minutes left. This from The Guardian. The EU's oil embargo. Sorry, I'm going to do that again. The EU's oil embargo came into full effect on Sunday. This is against Iran, marking a dramatic escalation in the pressure on Iran over its nuclear program. But while the sanctions are biting deeper into Iranians' life, with each passing day, it's less clear whether they will alter the minds of the Tehran leadership. Now, supposedly, about half of the Iranian exports of oil have stopped. The European Union sanction went into effect several days ago, so they are not buying any Iranian oil. Korea has stopped. They were the fourth largest importer of Iranian oil, and various other countries have stopped also. So this is causing big economic problems in Iran, but supposedly the leadership there isn't going to care that much.
Leadership has plenty to eat, comfortable houses,
that's
good air conditioning. There's no problem at all with leadership, right?
And they don't worry about revolts from the people
because they have the guns.
They do, and they controlled a little bit of a revolt that happened several years ago. When
controlled it with, they shot a number of them and imprisoned
the leaderships.
And there you have it.
Wow.
Right.
So they're pretty safe.
Doesn't look like they're going to budge. The problem with that is, if that is the case, well, what's the rest of the world going to do about that? It does appear that all this jawing about conferencing and dialoguing and the rest of it is not doing any good, and the sanctions also not doing any good, then what? Then it seems...
No. There's an
no,
elegant
it
way.
doesn't, huh?
Well, one idea was to bomb the Iranian nuclear plants, but there's this elegant way of just sabotaging their
they've been
computers.
Doing that. They have been doing that, and the Stuxnet has been relatively successful, but only to a point.
Well,
Then it sets them back maybe 6 months. Then they carry on.
well, but they say the bombing's only going to set them back, whatever they say, a couple of years maybe.
Well, that's a longer period.
They've also were knocking off some of the scientists. The Iranian scientists.
They've done that. Meanwhile, the United States has positioned a kind of floating dock in the Persian Gulf, which can carry various kinds of military equipment and such things. And it is a warning to the Iranians.
A floating dock?
Like a floating dock. It's more than that. I don't know quite how to describe it, but it carries a lot of military type equipment to be used if the Iranians try to block the Straits of Tehran.
All right, so we've got that, and we've got a quiet
It's a
build.
warning to them.
Right, and there's a buildup going on right now. Plus, Putin said...
Plus, many ships have been
Many
put,
ships.
right, warships in this area.
And Putin has said clearly that from all he knows with all his intelligence services and contacts in different parts of the world that there is going to be an attack. And then, if you add to that, as far as an election is concerned, if that happens in October, it's probably going to improve.
An October surprise.
It's going to improve Obama's chances. So there's a lot of reasons why it's looking like there may be something like that. All right, so here, one last thing before we have to go. It's from CNN. Egypt's president, his new president, Mohamed Morsi, is looking at ways to return lawmakers to office after parliament was dissolved by the military there. Morsi took office on Saturday, it's a few days ago, as Egypt's first democratically elected president, maybe ever.
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 Yes, ever.
In 5,000 years of Egyptian history. It's amazing. Anyway, the Supreme Council of Armed Forces disbanded the legislature, so they are effectively running the country. Morsi at this point is just a figurehead, but he's trying to get the parliament back, and it will then the armed forces will take a back seat. What do you think is going to happen there?
Hopefully. Well, I don't know if the armed forces will take a back seat. I think that they will try to retain control over military affairs and foreign affairs. That is to say, make sure that Morsi doesn't scuttle the agreement with Israel and other such important matters.
Well, that could work out well, and then Morsi handles domestic affairs.
I think the old Turkish model is what they want.
Yeah, which has worked quite well. All right, that's the end of our show. Thanks for joining us today here at NewsDesk, and thanks to video editor Katie Margolewski, master control David Epp, technical director Tony Zergibel, cameras, lighting, audio, Seth Palmer, writers for today's show, Stephanie Happ, Melissa Gallegos, Aaron Thompson. Tune in next week for another episode of NewsDesk on channel 95 analog, 991 digital, on the internet at wyou.org, and on YouTube at NewsDesk WYOU. Up next, the World News with Amy Goodman. This is Jason Miller broadcasting from Madison, Wisconsin. Bye for now.